Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Grace had always thought of love as something quiet, like a delicate hand on a shoulder in the dark or a shared cup of coffee in morning. She never dreamed it would demand the impossible, her own flesh and blood in exchange for someone else's freedom. But when Luna's punishment was read out in that sterile courtroom, Grace felt her world shift. 10 years. Luna was sentenced to 10 years in prison for a crime she denied committing, a murder attributed to her by a jury eager to wrap up the case. Grace sat in the gallery, her fingers curled so tightly in her lap that the knuckles turned white. Luna's eyes, wide and glassy, met hers across the room. Grace recognized the cry in that single look. "Get me out." The plan came to her in fragments, like a nightmare woven together from half-remembered memories. Luna was pregnant, early, hardly visible, the father a mere shadow from before the incarceration. The prison infirmary was understaffed, and the guards overworked. Miscarriages occurred. They were tragedies, sure, but they were also doorways. A medical emergency may necessitate transfer to a hospital outside the walls. A hospital meant civilians, confusion, and the possibility that the handcuffs may slip. Grace began visiting Luna every week, bringing her favorite lemon bars wrapped in wax paper and putting notes inside the crust. "Believe me," the first one read. Luna replied on a torn corner of a medical form. "I'm scared." Grace wrote again. "So am I." She began studying late into the night, with her laptop screen providing the only light in the flat. Herbs, dosage, and timing. She told herself it was theoretical and she would never cross the line. But the line kept moving. The doctor at the free clinic verified the pregnancy at 7 weeks. "Everything looks fine," he said, smiling as he examined Luna's flat stomach. Grace felt a knot in her gut as she waited in the corridor. She asked the doctor about the risks and what may go wrong. He rattled off statistics, stress, poor diet, and trauma. Grace nodded and memorized. When Luna appeared, pallid and clutching the ultrasound snapshot, Grace held her hand. "We're going to be okay," she lied. The drugs came from a former contact of Luna's, a woman who dealt in things better left unidentified. Grace met her in a parking lot at nightfall, the air heavy with fumes and the distant buzz of the highway. The woman handed over a little plastic bag with no questions asked. "Be careful," she advised. "This isn't aspirin." Grace paid with cash, her fingers quivering as she slipped the bag into her purse. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pills, small, white, and benign. She remembered the heartbeat on the ultrasound, the flutter too little to perceive but present all the same. She counted the fractures in the ceiling while thinking of Luna in that jail. She cried till her neck ached, then dried her face before writing the next note. Luna paused. Grace noticed it in the way her sister's hands shook as she read the instructions. 2 pills should be taken under the tongue and dissolved slowly. Then the cramping will begin. Scream if they do. Make it real. Luna replied with a single word. "Baby?" Grace responded with, "I'm sorry." She emphasized it 3 times. The day dawned gloomy and drizzly, and the jail yard glistened like a wound. Grace waited in the visiting room, her heart pounding against her ribcage. Luna appeared slimmer, with the orange jumpsuit sagging off her frame. They sat across from one another, the table between them covered in initials and curses. Grace slid the lemon bars across. Luna's fingers brushed against hers as she took them, a momentary touch that conveyed a lifetime of apology. That night, Luna carried out the plan. The pills tasted harsh on her tongue, so she laid on her bunk, waiting for the pain. It started slowly, a dull aching low in her stomach, then became harsher, like a fist closing inside her. She curled into herself and bit her lip till it bled. She shouted as her cramps got excruciating. The sound ricocheted from the cinderblock walls, raw and primal. Guards raced in, shouting and crackling radios. Luna was bleeding, and the sheet beneath her had darkened and spread. They hoisted her onto a stretcher, her body limp and her face sticky with sweat and tears. Grace received the call at 2:17 a.m. Your sister's being transferred to County General, the warden remarked, his voice tight. A possible miscarriage. You should come. Grace was already pulling on her coat, the keys icy in her grip. She sped through the rain, her wipers slapping back and forth like accusations. The hospital was a swirl of bright lights and sterile odors. Luna lay in a curtained bay, with N4 flowing into her arm and her eyes closed. A nurse drew Grace aside. She is stable, but she has lost the baby. I'm sorry. Grace nodded, her throat too thick to speak. She sat beside Luna's bed, holding her sister's hand as the monitors beeped incessantly. Luna's fingers felt frigid, and her nails were chewed down to the quick. She finally opened her eyes, and they were red-rimmed and elderly. It's gone, she whispered. Grace leaned closer, placing her forehead against Luna's. I know, she replied. I'm here. The escape was never planned. Grace had envisaged a transfer, a moment of distraction, and possibly a sympathetic orderly. But the hospital was closed down, with guards stationed at every exit. Luna was too weak to walk, let alone run. The days blurred together. Tests, consultations, and the silent anguish of an empty womb. Grace brought clean clothes, a hairbrush, and a small potted plant, which died within hours. She read to Luna from dog-eared paperbacks, her voice calm despite her shaky hands. One afternoon, a new nurse entered, young and apprehensive, her badge still shining. She checked Luna's chart and lingered. You're Grace, correct? She asked. Grace nodded. The nurse peeked at the door before leaning in. There is a service elevator in the East Wing. It rarely gets used after 8 p.m. Grace stared at her, the words failing to register. The nurse placed a key card in her palm. I heard what happened to your sister. Some debts are not paid in court. Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat in the vinyl chair with the key card burning a hole in her pocket. Luna was released the next day, declared stable enough to return to prison. The guards arrived wearing shackles, their faces blank. Grace watched as they cuffed Luna's wrists, the metal clicking like a death knell. Luna cast a single glance back as they dragged her away. Her eyes conveyed everything. Don't. But Grace couldn't let it go like this. She followed the ambulance in her car. The rain had ceased, and the roads were slick and sparkling. She parked and waited by the prison gates. Hours have passed. The sun set, and the sky turned purple. Then, shortly after 8 p.m., the service elevator in the East Wing opened. Luna went out barefoot, dressed in medical scrubs, her hair loose and wild. The nurse was with her, carrying a duffel bag over her shoulder. They went rapidly, shadows blending in, slipping into the city's underground maintenance tunnels. Grace met them at the agreed-upon location, an abandoned lot behind a closed laundromat. Luna slumped into her arms, sobbing silently. The nurse handed over the package containing cash, clothing, and a burner phone. Go north, she instructed. There is a shelter in Reading. They'll help. She vanished into the night. They traveled for hours, the radio turned off, the quiet heavy between them. Luna glanced out the window, her hand pushed against her empty stomach. I can still feel it, she admitted finally. Like a ghost. Grace reached over to cover Luna's palm with her own. I know, she said, the words insufficient but all she had. They left their car in a grocery store parking lot and boarded a bus, then another, meandering their way north via little towns and forgotten highways. Luna slept fitfully, her head resting on Grace's shoulder. Grace observed the landscape change, city giving way to woodland, concrete to pine. She remembered the life they'd left behind, the flat with its faulty faucet and the lemon bars cooling on the counter. She remembered the ultrasound photo, now ashes in a motel trash can. The Reading Refuge was a sprawling Victorian house with fading paint and a weed-infested garden. Bara, the woman who operated it, did not ask questions. She offered them a room with 2 narrow beds and a blocked window. Luna washed for an hour, the water chilly, before emerging wrapped in a towel, her skin crimson and sore. Grace unpacked the duffel bag, which contained ill-fitting clothes, a faded hoodie, and a stack of 20s kept together by a rubber band. The first night, Luna awoke screaming. Grace held her until the shaking ceased, and their tears mingled on the pillow. "I killed it," Luna muttered. Grace rocked her like a baby. "My baby." "You didn't kill anything," she said. "You survived. That's what matters." But the words were empty, like a fiction they were both pretending to believe. Days went into weeks. Luna's body had healed, but her eyes remained tormented. She walked through the garden in the mornings, removing weeds with mechanical precision. Grace got a job at a cafe, pouring coffee for truck drivers and retirees, her hands blistered from dishwater. They sat on the porch at night, sharing a single cigarette, its smoke spiraling into the darkness. Luna spoke occasionally, about the jail scents, the way the fluorescent lights buzzed, and the guard who slipped her an extra Jell-O. She never mentioned the baby directly, but Grace noticed Luna's hand drifting to her stomach when she thought no one was looking. One evening, Mara saw them in the kitchen, Luna staring at a pot of boiling water as if it contained answers. "You can't stay here forever," Mara remarked gently. Grace nodded. "They'll come looking eventually." She knew this before, but hearing it out confirmed it. They packed that night, the duffel bag lighter, and the cash virtually depleted. Mara offered them a map and a name, someone in Vancouver who could assist with paperwork. "Be careful," she said, placing a little wooden cross in Luna's hand. "Some roads are harder than others." The trip north was a whirl of buses, hitchhiking, truck stops, and sleepless nights. Luna became quieter, her silences deeper. She broke down in a motel outside of Seattle. "I dream about it," she said, her voice hoarse. "The baby. It's always weeping, and I can't find it." Grace held her while she wailed, the sound muffled by her shoulder. "It wasn't your fault," Grace replied. Luna shook her head. "It was ours." They crossed the border at a remote post, the guard only glancing at their falsified IDs. Vancouver was rainy and dismal, with mountains towering like silent judges. They discovered a room above a bakery, with the aroma of bread oozing through the floorboards. Grace waitressed again, and Luna cleaned the offices at night. They moved slowly, said little, and kept their lives simple: work, sleep, and the odd shared supper of rice and canned beans. Months have passed. Luna's hair grew out, and the prison dye faded to her natural chestnut. She smiled occasionally, little and brief, when a customer left a generous tip or the rain stopped for an hour. Grace eyed her, looking for traces of the sister she'd known, the one who danced in the kitchen to old Motown and gathered seashells to place between book pages. That Luna was gone, replaced by a quiet woman with shadows under her eyes. One April morning, Luna awoke Grace before dawn. "I need to go back," she said. Grace sat up with the room still dark. "What?" Luna was already dressed, and her motions were deliberate. "I can't continue jogging." Grace argued and pleaded, but Luna had already made up her mind. "I have to face it," she added. "For the baby. For us." They boarded a bus south, the miles unraveling like a string stretched too taut. At the border, Luna surrendered herself. The agents were astonished but efficient, and the cuffs became familiar. Grace sat on the sidelines, her heart hard in her chest. Luna returned a single glance, her gaze unwavering. "Tell them the truth," she stated. "All of it." The trial was quick. Luna pleaded guilty to escaping, but the miscarriage, the premeditated tragedy, was revealed during evidence. Grace entered the stand, her voice quivering as she described the pills, cries, and blood. The prosecutor described it as wicked. The defense labeled it desperation. Luna sat calmly with her hands folded, and the wooden cross Mara had given her clenched in her fist. Finally, they added 5 years. Luna was transferred to a separate facility, complete with a garden and library. Grace stopped by when she could, bringing lemon bars and news from the outside world. Luna's hair was graying, and her face was lined yet peaceful. "I'm fine," she said one afternoon, with the sun slanting through the visiting room window. "I planted tomatoes." "They're doing well," Grace said, tears welling in her eyes. "I miss you," she said. Luna stretched across the table and brushed Grace's fingers. "I know," she replied, "but we're free in our own way." Years later, Grace stood in the prison garden, the plants loaded with tomatoes. Luna was beside her sentence almost complete, her hands soiled with soil. They didn't talk about the past much anymore, the pills, the blood, the ghosts that hovered between them. Some debts were paid quietly, with the slow shift of the seasons, or by tending to something that developed despite everything. Grace plucked a tomato, still warm from the sun, and presented it to Luna. "For the road," she explained. Luna smiled, her face gentle and genuine. "For the road," she repeated. They walked back to the visiting room, the weight of their actions becoming bearable, almost peaceful. The baby was vanished, but they remained, two sisters united by a pain too profound for words, carrying it forward into whatever came next. The rain hit the jail walls like 1,000 whispered apologies, gently yet unrelenting. Inside the women's ward, the air was thick with bleach and sadness. Luna sat on her small cot, staring at the peeling paint that curled away from the concrete like aged skin. It had been 67 days since she had seen the sky without bars over it. It had been 67 days since she had felt her mother's arms. And it had been 3 weeks since she felt the first flutter of life inside her, the baby that could never have been in such a place. She rested her palm to her stomach, murmuring to the tiny pulse of hope building within her. "You don't deserve this," she said softly. "You don't deserve me." Her voice trembled as the words slipped. The baby was the only light she had left, but it was also the anchor that bound her to this world of gray and iron. Grace sat outside the visitation booth, her fingers quivering over a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee. Her reflection in the glass divider appeared older than she remembered. Her eyes sank into her cheeks, and her lips were pallid and brittle. The past 2 months had taken more from her than the previous 20 years combined. Seeing her daughter behind the glass, pregnant and shattered, had left a need inside her that no amount of optimism could heal. When Luna was finally led into the room, tied at the wrists, Grace's calm was broken. She reached out and pressed her palm against the glass, longing for the warmth she could no longer feel. "Mom," Luna said, her voice faint and hesitant. Grace tried to grin, but her mouth quivered excessively. "You look tired, sweetheart." "I don't sleep much," Luna replied. "They leave the lights on all night. They think it prevents us from dreaming." Grace's throat tightened. "Are you still feeling okay? What about the baby?" Luna nodded weakly. "She is moving. This is unusual. It feels like a secret I can't tell anyone." They sat still for a minute, two ladies separated by glass and fate. Grace then leaned forward, reducing her voice to a whisper even though the guards couldn't hear her over the barrier. "Listen attention to what I say. I've found a means to get you out." Luna blinked, disbelief flashing through her gaze. "Mom, no. Don't. Whatever it is, you can't." Grace's visage tightened, like a mother's determination mixed with despair. "I can. I will. You do not belong in here. You made a mistake, Luna, but you don't deserve to die for it. Not you." "Not with that baby," Luna said, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't want you to get wounded because of me." "Honey," Grace muttered, her voice shaking, "all that's left of me is already hurt. Let me do this." Grace spoke in snatches for the next few minutes about a guard she had paid, missing papers, and an upcoming night when the infirmary would be understaffed. Luna listened quietly, her heart sinking with each word. Grace's voice had a troubled and final quality that suggested Luna the plan wasn't really about escape. It was all about sacrifice. Luna was unable to fall asleep that night. The baby shifted inside her, reminding her that her decisions were no longer her own. She recalled the accident that had led her here. The automobile, the scream, and the glass exploding like 1,000 small stars. She had not intended to kill anyone. However, intentions did not eliminate outcomes. When dawn arrived, she was summoned to the infirmary. Grace's strategy was already in action. The nurse on duty turned away as Luna was led in. The room smelled of iodine and loneliness. A tray sat alongside the cot, containing a needle, gauze, and an unlabeled bottle. Luna's pulse quickened. "Where is Dr. Harrow?" she asked. "He called in sick," the nurse replied curtly. Grace walked out from behind the curtain, saying, "New coverage today." She was dressed in loose scrubs and a low-cut cap. Luna became unable to breathe for a brief moment. "Mom," she whispered. Grace closed the curtain behind her. "Keep your voice down." Her hands shook as she laid the platter down. "It is tonight. After that, they will have to take you to the hospital. You'll be free by morning." Luna glanced at her, realizing with a cold glow. "What are you doing?" Grace cradled her daughter's face in her hands, eyes weeping and voice broken. "I am doing what mothers do. I am rescue you." "No," Luna replied, moving away. "Not like this. You cannot." Grace grasped for her wrist. "You do not comprehend. If you lose the baby, they will relocate you. There is commotion at the hospital. I've scheduled a switch. You'll leave under another name. You'll disappear. You may start afresh." Luna's heart pumped, each beat a scream from her breast. "What about the baby?" Grace's eyes cracked at the weight of her daughter's stare. "The baby will not make it. I apologize, but it's the only way." Luna felt the world tilt, her knees weakening. She gazed down at her stomach and then up at her mother. "Do you want me to kill her?" Grace's lips trembled. "I want you to live." Their quiet was excruciating. Outside, a guard's radio crackled, oblivious to the catastrophe happening beyond the curtain.